Hi all, in today's video I'll go over the smothered mate. This pattern is quite fascinating to me. It just looks brilliant when you win a game like that. Don't you think so? Here as you see, the black king is trapped in the corner and surrounded by his own pieces, and the white knight is delivering the mate. Have a good look at the structure here, because this is what we'll be looking for in the next few positions. Once you understand the theme, it's not that difficult to find actually, since you know what you look for. But when you're playing a game, such patterns are not always the easiest to spot. Anyway, let's go to the next position. Here it's black to play. The white king, as you see, is trapped in the corner, so that suggests a possibility of a smothered mate. And the white king cannot prevent getting mated from this position, since it's black to play. And there's actually a mate in 3. You can pause the video and see if you can spot it. I'll go into the solution. Well, black starts with knight to g4. This threatens a mate in 1 with queen h2. So the only way to prevent that would be queen f4. And now, although white is able to guard h2 with his queen, black can still play queen h2 and let his queen be taken. This sacrifice actually allows black to play his knight to f2 and deliver the final blow. And as you see, we've arrived at the exact same structure that we had in the previous position. This kind of sacrifice is a strategic idea to force the opponent's pieces around the king, and hence take away all the flight squares. I think deflecting pieces around the king can also be used to achieve the same smothered mate pattern. Here as you see, this battery of bishop and queen is eyeing the g1 square, and it would be mate actually if there were no rooks over here. But if you consider what the board would look like after queen to g1, you'll realize that the king cannot capture the queen since it's guarded by the bishop, so the only other reply would be rook captures queen. And now the king is stuck in the corner, so knight f2 delivers mate. This is a very similar position to the previous one. In fact, it actually looks almost the same, a move earlier. It's black to play, and I think this kind of position does arise quite often in blitz chess. Here black can play queen f2, check, not queen h2, since that would not be fruitful, and this drives the king into the corner. And now the queen sack, queen g1, check. And now it really doesn't matter which piece white captures with, it'll be mate. Knight f2 is mate. This is another interesting position. It's white to play. I think one thing worth mentioning here is that in this kind of mating pattern, the best part is that it works even when the opponent has a strong back rank. Like, what I mean to say is that even when the rooks are on the back rank, the mate still works. Like in this position, black has both his rooks protecting the 8th rank, and it's still possible to mate the black king. It's in fact a forced mate. Anyway, here white starts with queen e6, check. And now the black king has two options. You can either go to f8 or h8. If king f8, then obviously queen to f7 is mate. And at this position, if the king decides to go to h8, then there's a series of moves which leads to the mate. Knight f7 can be played, and this forces the king back to g8. And now, if you notice, the king and the queen are on the same diagonal, so as soon as the knight moves out of the way, the king will be in check. So the key move is knight to h6, inflicting the double check. And now again, if the king goes back to f8, then it's queen f7 mate. So the king will have to go to h8. And now is the important move, which is queen to g8. The king cannot capture the queen because it's protected by the knight. So the only move is rook captures queen. And now, as you see, the king is surrounded by his own pieces. So knight to f7 finishes the game. Going back, there's actually an alternative way of finishing the game from here. After this move, after the king comes back to g8, another possible move could be knight to d8. And again, that seals off all the squares for the black king. If the black king goes back to, say, f8, then again, queen f7. And if it goes to h8, then we have queen e8, delivering the back rank mate. Hope you found this position quite interesting. Let's move on to the next position. Have a look at this position. It's black to play. White threatens a mate in 1 here. So black cannot really afford to waste any time. Before going on to the defensive though, it's worthwhile exploring the ways to counterattack. In fact, if you analyze this position, you will realize that there's a mate in 6. The route to checkmate is the same though. You can pause the video and see if you can find it. It shouldn't be that hard to find since we've already gone through a couple of positions and it's just theory now. Here black plays queen c1, check, forcing the rook to interpose, after which the queen repositions itself onto e3. So queen e3, check. And now the king's only option is to play king h1. The rook interposition here would be of no use because the queen would simply take it. So after king h1, we have knight to f2. If the knight is taken, then queen e1, and that would lead to checkmate. So the knight cannot be taken. And here, from here on, it's just the same as the previous example. The double check. This is the key move, forcing the king into the corner. And then the smothered mate with knight f2. Sometimes it's also possible to deliver the smothered mate in situations where, although the king isn't really trapped by his own pieces, all the flight squares around him are blocked. Here, black still checkmates the white king in the same smothering fashion. Knight f2 can't be played right away because of rook captures knight, but black can deflect the rook by instead playing his queen to g1, because this forces rook captures queen, after which knight f2 conceals the mate. This flight square is not really a flight square because it's taken by the rook. So although the king is not surrounded by his own pieces, all the squares around the king are blocked, and hence it's checkmate. The same theme repeats itself. It's again a similar position, and it's white to play. Notice that the black king is trapped on h8, and the diagonal leading to it is wide open. This can be exploited by playing queen f6, check. This forces black to take on f6, after which knight f7 is checkmate. Here it's white to play. At first glance, it just looks like white can mate with queen g7. However, there's a knight protecting that particular square, so it won't be checkmate. But don't stop at that. Imagine what the board would look like after queen g7 and knight captures queen. Let's see what happens. Well, I think from here you should get to the solution. There's a mate in 1. See if you can find it. Well, knight h6 is the move. The white bishop and rook seal off the important squares e6 and g6 from the king, and the knight takes away g8. So there's really no square for the black king, and it's checkmate. This is a good example of the power of the minor pieces when they coordinate and work together. It's really a devastating effect. In this position, it's black to play. White's bishop is attacking the black queen, as you see. But before thinking about defensive options and retreating, notice the pair of bishops attacking the king in a crisscross arrangement. Beautiful bishops. Also the knight can come to c2 to check the white king. A little bit of calculation brings us to the conclusion that the white king is trapped. So black can actually play queen captures bishop and let his queen be taken, because after this there's knight c2, which is checkmate. You could call this an invisible smothered mate. Again, this is a perfect example of how to use the combination of minor pieces to produce a wonderful effect and checkmate. Here it's white to play. This is the last position for today also. I think the thought process is also quite important. The deflection tactic is again used for the smothered mate. It's an interesting way to remove the defender of a particular square. In this position, it's quite obvious that white could have played knight c7 and given checkmate if the black queen weren't protecting that particular square. So white has a beautiful deflecting resource. White can just play queen to b5, and if the queen is taken, then it's obviously mate here, and if not, there would be quite a dramatic loss of material. Rybka suggests queen d8. I'll actually turn on Rybka. This is getting quite interesting. Let's see what Rybka thinks. Analyze. Rybka suggests queen b5, queen d8. Oh, so this is a heavy loss of material, after which this is what it looks like. Quite interesting. Interesting variation from Rybka. That's all for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to leave any comments on YouTube, and if you haven't already, please subscribe if you like this kind of content. Thanks again. Bye-bye.